like to invite questions from the audience. I'd like, if you could, please phrase your question as concisely as possible, and also let us know who you would like to address the question to. Do we have questions from the audience? Okay. A microphone. Oh, you have, okay.
I'm Francesco Iannone, and I have a question for Professor Takeyama.
Oh, Nanci Takeyama? Is
Yeah.
that, I'm sorry, she's teaching.
Oh, sorry, first I make mistake. For the professor from Japan, regarding one interesting example you did regarding the dialogue between two persons. Now, it's very important when I see in the face the people that I have in front of me for better understanding the sound. Do you have make any research regarding this, connecting with the mirror neuron, for instance?
Neuron, you mean brain?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, I did do some research in the neuroscience area because of the project for creating the brains with the speech and motion. But it's sometimes rather difficult because when you're speaking, your muscle moves. So that means the brain wave also is mixed with muscle waves. So it's sort of difficult to distinguish between these two waveforms.
The two actions.
Yeah, two actions. But that's I think it's a very interesting subject. I did attend a nanotechnology conference last year in Venice or something. And there was a similar study done in Italy as well. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for your very interesting comment.
Any other questions? Yes, up here.
Thank you. I'm Semir Zeki from University College London. I'd like to address a few comments to Professor Zan. I appreciate the nice words you said about English universities, but it is not how I see it, actually. I think that we are rapidly becoming corporate bodies, and the old ideals of serving education and knowledge and students I don't see it there. I see it disappearing rapidly. I think that our emphasis is on getting more money, getting top of the league tables at whatever cost. We will sacrifice departments such as Latin and Greek, which are not capable of raising as much money as departments of medical immunology. So I actually see a rather bleak future for our universities, and in that perhaps places like Oxford and Cambridge are slightly more protected because they have got so much wealth. But in general, I see a very, very bleak future for our universities, and I wonder whether you have any comments to make about that.
Not sure I really get your question. Now, what I was saying, I mean, was referring on the interaction with management and the teaching of arts management and how arts management is relating to other disciplines. So in that way, in most, so my critiques were referred not in general on how universities are surviving or how humanities are interacting and surviving. It's really, you know, in the way in which, you know, I have the feeling that as management, expert. We are so, I mean, I really rediscover the value and meanings of management working with historians. When you see the kind of things that normal or social historian cannot see because they don't understand management. And I say, that's something that is really something that we could add. But I have the idea that management is a kind of ancillary kind of knowledge. So we should be very modest in that. And what I see all over the world in the management field is how it is so easy to take over and to have this redundancy. I mean, even in well-developed countries, one of the studies that I made was on the British Museum and the whole crazy debates on the British Museum with the Edwards report and with the lady, you know, with the managing director at the end of the 1990s. You know, that is really how management is unable to understand and respect different knowledges. So that is my point in terms of, and also as a management expert and as an economist, I'm so scared about the market itself, you know, about the failure of the market to understand values, and how we can address and make money in a very easy way. But in 20 years from now, 40 years from now, the kind of knowledge, in a sense, something we were discussing, you know, after 40 years of funding, for instance, at the European level, where you don't know, when you give money also for projects that are strong technological meanings, or there's a lot of electronics and computer-based exercise, we in a sense, we risk to be, in a sense, free riding, in a sense, on knowledge that are already there and that we are not helping to survive. I don't know if
but I would argue, with permission, Madam Chair, I would argue that management is ignorant of what the university is about. I think we have employed, you see, there are, I don't want to name names because I'm not gunning for any university, but it's generally true that the number of managers at universities has increased beyond anything in the academic domain, so that we don't know who's serving whom. Now, many of these managers are shamefully ignorant of the courses that they are actually executively in charge of. You see, when I was a medical student, the dean was elected by the professors and did it for 2 years, and he was re-elected. Now you get from outside, with headhunters involved, managers who may appear to be very good, they may have worked at ICI, but know very little really about history or philosophy or medicine, and they push us around. And I think this is an extremely unhealthy situation.
You know, I agree with you. But it's really difficult. I'm trying always to teach my students in the management field, don't trust too much in management. Don't be too, I mean, this is just a part of knowledge that is necessary and part of the skills also. But in one sense, I'm very critical toward, you know, MBAs and this, you know, the real evolution. I mean, we teach too much management in a sense, and we teach too much management to management scholars. But still, on the other hand, where most of these things fail, in Italy, in China, or in any country I've been working on, is, I mean, it's so easy to have this kind of special project out of time and out of space when you have ad hoc funding for a ad hoc project. And it's fascinating. Then when you have to go back to routines and to administrative routines, you really miss serious management knowledge in terms of people in the public sector that can understand and help and interact in museums and so on. So it's paradoxically, we have too much and not enough at the same time.
I think I'm a physicist, so I'm not from the economic field. But I think that what matters here is what you put in the fitness function or in the evaluation of the success of a management of any institution or of a company. If you put, for example, you are a manager of, I don't know, a museum. If you only consider as a successful management how much money you manage to raise, then clearly the problem that you are discussing is a real problem, because it may be that the museum just cannot make enough money to be successful by evaluating it only by like economical means. But if you include, if in the evaluation it is included, for example, that you are preserving the heritage or the art that is in the museum, then probably the management would shift from a very money-based approach to a more comprehensive type way to measure it. So I think if the only way you evaluate the society nowadays evaluates the success of a management skill is only by the financial return, then of course the situation is pretty bleak, because only the most lucrative institutions can survive, and most of the others, they will just die away. I don't know if it makes sense, but
no, I mean that's why I don't use the term management anymore, because it's so misleading. I mean, let's talk about organizing. So whether you're organizing a museum, I mean, I'm not so arrogant to tell you what the value should be and what the main goals should be. I'm just helping you from a methodological point of view in making it possible, in making it sustainable. So I'm very interested as an anthropologist and as an ethnographer in understanding professional values, but I'm not trying to impose these professional values. So, and what is interesting, of course, it's not management scholars. It's the society we live in. It's the taxpayer. It's the neoliberalism that is putting the ways in that direction. But what is interesting, when I start doing research abroad, and in the South and in the East, you find a thing completely different from what you describe, which is the normal in a European and a North American organization, where you cannot break even. You can survive just with donors or with state grant. But when you go abroad, or when you go in developing country, you find a completely different situation, which is paradoxically even more dangerous. If you go to Machu Picchu, it's one of the richest places in the world. And that is even more dangerous, because you can make so much profit, and profit exploitation, and appropriation of profits, which is more dangerous than underfunding of the Pompeii itself. If you go in China with Western prices and Eastern cost, you can make a lot of money out of these huge archaeological sites. And that is even more dangerous. So it's a very difficult, sustainability from an organizational, institutional, and a financial point of view, without any interest in profit, to be honest. Just financial sustainability, which is another issue. It's so difficult in different ways.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have two questions for two different speakers. So I will make the second one first. It's more like a comment for Dr. James Morris. It's about Shakespeare. I wonder if you are aware of this project called Watson, which speaks Shakespearean language in all facets. That is a very important project where the intelligence of Shakespeare is actually inside the computer. So the second question is for Professor Kawamori-san. This is about your Bayesian network. You cite the example in your presentation just now. My question is about the rain, for example. Is what kind of granularity that you go into? The reason being, for example, you say rain. And do you involve like a lot of attributes? One such attribute is like location. Location is can be defined in many ways. Of course, the first thing we think of is GPS and etc. But it is very important. The reason is because, I don't know about in Japan, but in Singapore and many places in this region, tropical, I cannot tell you how many degrees away from equator such situation can happen because I'm not an atmospheric scientist. But when it rains, a road can be clearly divided either horizontally or vertically. I mean, I'm measuring in terms of XY axis, okay? And one side of the road is absolutely dry, and just, I don't know how many millimeters away, it is absolutely wet. So to do this because in your presentation, you mentioned it's a rough conversation with this kind of events. But as I think I'm quite interested in this Bayesian network, and you can explain technically to me. Thank you.
Thank you. So, you start from.
Was it the IBM Watson thing you were talking about? Yeah, I'm very familiar with that technology. This is the computer that managed to beat Jeopardy experts at Jeopardy. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that could be a very interesting development. You have where you have a system that can, I guess you could ask questions about Shakespeare, but also maybe it could write future plays in the style of Shakespeare.
This is very private. I have a project on Venus and Adonis, which is the longest poem of Shakespeare. Something to do with the computer. I'll take this offline. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, definitely. I'd be very interested to talk to you actually, because my published book and my dissertation was about artificial intelligence in the arts. So I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about there. But I'll pass over to the other question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very interesting question. Is it about granularity? Is how precise or
yeah, you can speak as much detail if time permits. I'm okay with technical.
Okay, so you mean
my background?
Maybe I think you can choose your granularity and how you define, the space, location could be the whole Singapore or just one local area or just one hand. That depends. I mean, it's the same thing with phonemes, yeah. The sound. You can make it very, very precise and very, the first offset, onset, and then the middle, and then the offset. You can do that, but maybe you can just take one phone or one word or one morpheme. That depends on the component. So you can make your model depending on your requirements. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. How much has this been done in terms of like this rain example? Because between rain and sprinkler is actually the same in this case.
Yes. That's a very simplified example to make it understandable to many general public. So in the actual cases, we have more sophisticated version. Okay. It's more complicated.
I guess offline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Do you have any questions for each other?
I was going to say to my colleague from UCL actually that maybe what you're thinking about could be with management and UK universities could be something that is actually something that's to do with the way education has changed in the last few years in the UK with the introduction of student fees, because that has radically changed the model of universities. And I've seen this. Ravensbourne, as you can probably also tell from the projects that I presented, these will probably be the most commercial orientated projects that are presented at this conference, because Ravensbourne is a very commercially focused institution. And when I go to conferences with other UK institutions, they're now thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? We're churning out students who've just studied an English degree, and then right at the end they're thinking, how are we going to get a job? And now they're starting to think about how do we actually get students into work, and think about that all the way through, which is something that we as an institution have been doing because of our focus as, we're essentially a polytechnic that has become a university. And this is all to do with, this is the commercialisation of the education industry in the UK. And it's a governmental thing. We can look at the US, maybe the US, who's always had a commercial educational system, actually they don't have that problem so much, which is a kind of interesting. We're kind of knee-jerk reaction, really worried about, about the fact that we're all having to be businessmen now instead of educationalists. We're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater there. Whereas I think in other parts of Europe, and this again addresses what Luca was talking about, different economic model essentially. I'm not fully aware about the funding model of universities in Italy or other European countries, but I suspect it's a lot more governmental as well. So you do have a kind of state distributional model of economics there, which we're moving much more to a pure capitalist model of education in the UK, which is, as I say, has always been there in America. So that's what I wanted to say about that.
The American industry has a similar kind of problems in terms of okay. They have a problem too, because I think that a lot of universities, especially private universities, are profit-driven actually. They have to make a lot of money. Endowment is one thing they get, but the fees are increasing. This is why the fees are very, very high. I mean, it's impossible to study in America if you don't have a lot of money. So it's marginalizing the society in a way. So unless you go to the public university, which is very low funded by either by the city or by the government, so it's a big problem. And the thing is that fever is spreading into other countries, even in developing countries. So everything, all education becomes very privatized. It costs a lot of money.
Yeah, may I add on this comment? I mean, it's really, in the university, there is another issue apart from marginalizing the poor. It's not the first time, but it's really the way in which we do teach, which is really in this commercial way, which is make us as a university in the same problem with other arts organizations and cultural organizations. That's a client, what the clients want. And I remember I had in Bologna, we had a conference with a very important guest, and the student was not there. Were not there. There were just 3 students out of 30. So I wrote them a very nasty letter saying that is unacceptable. Whatever the reason, this is such an important guest, blah, blah, blah. And I was really making the point. And I got a telephone call a few days after from my double degree partner in Pittsburgh, say, what the hell happened? I wrote this letter from my student, the double degree student, that was offended by my way of dealing with students, criticizing them, and so on. I mean, the idea that they are client and they know what they want is, is one of the, is really, it's a cancer in the way in which we do teach. I mean, there is my classes I'm using in one class is Polanyi, which is particularly difficult for students to read. And they complain, say, it's difficult. Yes, and so what? So it's difficult. Learn to read difficult stuff. And the idea that all things have to be as the visitors, as the user, as the client, whether the client is the taxpayer, our students, or the visitor in the museum, is really corrupting the idea of transferring of knowledge by someone with some kind of expertise to someone, which is not a democratic relationship. And we are in this rhetoric, this paranoid rhetoric of, the right of everyone, which is killing the role of the expert, even within the university.
But you see, whose fault is that? I mean, it's largely our fault because we have been the accepting, us, the university professors, the university teachers, we have accepted everything lying down. None of us has got up and fought it. There are now organizations in Britain, and especially in Ireland, actually, which are fighting this. But we have been the willing victims of this. And I put the fault squarely at our own doorstep. And I agree with you 100% about the client relationship. It has changed dramatically. Even for students, English students who did not pay before and who now pay, their attitude is dramatically different.
Okay. All right. Are we out of time? I think so. Okay, we continue at the tea break. So please, all of you quiet people, you must have some questions to ask our panelists. This is your chance at the tea. All right, thank you so much for illuminating the complexity of this field.